Okay, hello. Hello, my friends. I uh I don't feel like putting my face on camera today, and I also have been recording some Minecraft footage over the past week or so. So I have 5 hours of footage that I really need to get rid of because it's taking up space on my phone. So I got to use that footage. So enjoy. Today I'm going to be talking about my parents. And I have a lot of notes that I've made over the past few days thinking about my parents and all of the numerous ways that they messed up with me. Now, I don't want this to be to come across as oh, I'm just an angsty child is complaining, just bitching and moaning about my parents or whatever. I mean, that is kind of what I'm doing, but my parents made legitimate mistakes that really, really affected the trajectory of my life. And I don't really hold them responsible for that because I know that they did their best, right? They parented me the way that they thought would be the most successful. And they didn't really know any other way to do it. What I do hold them accountable for is their lack of curiosity, their lack of open-mindedness. When faced with repeated failures of their parenting method to produce a normal child, they really, really should have considered other options. They should have been a little more open-minded, a little more curious, and a little more gung-ho about figuring out the truth and getting to the bottom of what was really going on with me. So here's a little background about my parents, right? My parents, the people that I call my parents, they actually are my grandparents. They legally adopted me and became legally my parents when I was 7 years old after my biological mom died. And my biological dad was never in the picture. He actually ended up homeless as well. So my grandparents are my biological dad's parents, and they adopted me. So from here on out, if I refer to my mom and my dad or my parents, those are the people I'm talking about. Not my biological parents, but the ones that adopted me and raised me from the age of 7. So they're baby boomers. And my dad is retired now. My mom never really had a career, a long stretching career as far as I can tell. She never told me about anything like that. She had a couple of jobs. She was a police officer at one point, so that's great. But and she had a psychology degree that she loved to hold over my head. Oh, I know so much about psychology, that's why I can call you a stubborn child or a problem child or whatever, because I know so much about psychology. Because she had a degree, and she never really pursued a career in that as far as I know. So she just went to college. I'm not even sure if she graduated and got a degree, but she liked to tell me that she did. Chances are she actually did 2 semesters of psychology in college and then, didn't actually finish that. But I don't know. My dad worked the same job for 48 years or something like that. He served in Vietnam, and then he worked a construction job for the rest of his life up until retirement. And now he's retired. And he was we were a middle class kind of family, lower middle class, middle class type of thing. I didn't live in poverty as long as I was living with them. And that was the one good thing that they did for me, is that they didn't expose me to poverty. So to give you an idea of what my parents were like and the kind of attitude they had toward parenting, I'll tell you a story about Um, well, this is a story that my mom told me that happened to her when she was around my age at the time of telling me this, which would have been like 12 or something. She was eating dinner with her mom, and her mom had prepared dinner, and her mom had refilled the salt shaker and then didn't screw the lid all the way back on. And so when my mom, this woman's daughter, went to salt her food, the lid came off and a huge pile of salt fell on her food. And her mom got so mad and made her eat all of the food with the salt pile or go hungry that night. So this mistake that her mom made ended up becoming a punishment for my mom. My mom told me this story when I was like 12, 13 years old. And she told me this story, and at the end, she was like, "This is why your mother is always right. Even when she's wrong, she's right." And I was like, what? What? Are you kidding me? That's the moral of that story? That's what you're trying to get across here? Is that your mother is always right even when she's wrong? Oh my goodness. I mean, she would have been really better off not telling me that story, because I was smart enough as a kid to know that that was some bullshit. That was some bullshit. Like, are you kidding me? So yeah, my parents were very much, mind your elders. Children are to be seen, not heard. Don't speak until you're spoken to, kind of thing. That's how my parents were, because that's how they were raised. And to be honest with you, it's very sad. And I refused to be raised that way. My parents, they demanded things of me that, the way they spoke to me was just very disrespectful. And of course, being my parents, they didn't believe that they had to show me any respect. But, I demanded respect, even as a child. I wasn't going to let people just push me around. And what I now understand is that I had something, and I still have this, something called PDA, autism PDA, or it's something that comes along with autism and ADHD sometimes. It's called pathological demand avoidance. And we're trying to get it rebranded to persistent drive for autonomy, because that is what the internal experience of it feels like. And it's essentially an anxiety thing. It's essentially a fight or flight response that happens when one's autonomy or identity is perceived to be under threat, right? So something as simple as my parents asking me to do a chore could give me a spike of anxiety. It could send me into a fight or flight. And obviously, as a child, I still need to do chores. Even as an adult, I still need to do chores. And this is something that I've grappled with for my whole life, is this PDA thing. But, it's very, very, it would have been very, very simple to accommodate this anxiety with a change of tone. So my parents were very much like, let's say they ask me to do the dishes. They would say, "Do the dishes right now." They wouldn't say, "Could you do the dishes at some point today? It's okay if you don't get to it." They wouldn't say anything like that, because that would be giving me like some kind of leeway, right? That would be giving me an excuse to not do the chore. And they really needed me to just do it. So instead, they would basically say, "Do the dishes right now, because I said so, or else you're grounded." And that, very forceful sort of tone, it triggered anxiety in me. And I didn't even really understand that it was anxiety at the time. But that's what it did. It gave me anxiety. It felt as if my autonomy was being threatened. And, why do I have this pathological demand avoidance? Why do I have this fear of my autonomy being threatened? I don't exactly know. Apparently it's something that comes along with autism sometimes. And I can sort of understand it thinking back to how my early childhood must have been, where I was being passed around between caretakers that were all too busy and inexperienced to really properly take care of me. And so I was neglected a lot of the time. And so even from an early age, I may have developed this need to have autonomy because I couldn't trust other people to have my best interests in mind. So even from a very young age, I've always been that type of I want to do it myself. I just want to do it myself. Don't help me with it. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to do it. Just, give me some basic guidelines, answer my questions, send me at the task, and let me do it without interrupting me, without messing me up, right? Very, independent as far as I can be. And so being told to do chores and stuff was really, it sent me into a fight or flight response, which I didn't even understand. And it was expressed as anger. And, if you're my parents, it's kind of understandable that this, you'd want to come down on that with a strong fist. And again, I'm sure that they thought they were doing what was best for me, but it really had the opposite effect. My parents told me, you just want to get your way. You just want your way or the highway. And I mean, what's so wrong with that? They could have maybe tried to cooperate with me a little better instead of just trying to strong arm me into being a good child. Because obviously it never worked. And you'd think after so many years of it not working that you would have tried something else. But they just, kept doing. So when I was 14 years old, they did try to put me in therapy. Well, I asked for therapy because I could tell that, I was so depressed. I was so anxious all the time. I was angry all the time. I felt like nobody liked me. I felt like my life wasn't going anywhere. I was 14 years old. And I was reading online that, maybe therapy could help. So I asked for therapy. And my parents sent me to a psychiatrist. Not a therapist, a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist diagnosed me with bipolar 2 and gave me medications. And my parents made sure that I kept up with those medications. And they did not help. They didn't do anything for me. And when I realized this, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I felt that they would be angry even if I told them that these medications weren't working. They probably, what I really thought at the time was that they probably would have told me, oh, you're just skipping doses, you're not doing it right, or whatever, or increase the dose, etc. And I was just I knew deep down that this was not the way. I wanted therapy, and I wanted specifically family therapy. I asked for therapy, and I said, can we also, if possible, find a family counselor so we can all sit down together and discuss, what my problems with your parenting style are and why it's not working. But they refused that idea. They did not at all want to believe that they were doing something wrong. So not only did they not send me to a therapist, they just threw meds at me. Now, at 14 years old, asking for therapy is a very mature thing to do, especially asking for family therapy. And, as a child, maybe I didn't, quite phrase it well enough. Maybe I phrased it in a way that made them feel attacked. But the point is, they simply did not want to admit that they could be doing anything wrong. It was all completely my fault. I was the problem child. I was the stubborn one that didn't mind my parents. So family therapy was off the table. And I think also they were scared to send me to a real therapist because they felt that maybe that, I would end up in cahoots with the therapist against them or something. I hear that that's a common anxiety that parents have about sending their kids to therapy. And it's very interesting because my mom, I don't know if I mentioned already, but she had a psychology degree. She told me that she had a psychology degree, and she held that over my head all the time. She told me that, like, she told me, like, well, she used, like, psychotherapy terms of, back in the 70s and 80s when I presume she was in college. Psychology terms like cognitive dissonance and stuff like that, right? Like, you're doing a cognitive that's a cognitive dissonance right there. That's a cognitive dissonance. She would just, psychoanalyze me, which any professional that has a psychology degree knows you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that to your family members. But she was trying to, psychoanalyze me. And in ways that painted me as this just problem child that needed to get fixed. They demanded respect through fear. They threatened me and destroyed my things. And after I moved out of the house, my dad started hanging up on me whenever we would call, whenever we'd have a phone call, and I would, discussions would get a little heated, and then he would just hang up on me. As soon as I made any sort of mention of, like, this could have also been your, you may have made some mistakes, as soon as it broached that territory whatsoever, the conversation was over. He would literally just hang up the phone on me, and he would threaten to stop paying for my cell service, which would really screw me over. He would destroy my things when I was a kid, which really, really upset me. And, they just were not really curious about me, I think. That was the main issue, is that they just weren't curious about me. I remember, so I was homeschooled for the majority of my schooling, but I did every once in a while, go to public school. I went for a couple weeks in 6th grade, and then I finished high school. The last couple years, I finished high school in public school. And I remember coming home from, like, my first week of 6th grade, and I had made some people laugh while I was in class. I, like, said a joke, and a bunch of people laughed, and I was really happy about that. And I came home, and I told my dad about it. I was like, I made people laugh. I'm funny. I'm like the class clown. And I just said it sort of, like, offhand, like, not really meaning anything about it. And he told me sometime later that when I said that, he cried that night. He cried because I said that I was the class clown. And he didn't want me to be the class clown. He sat me down and he was like, the class clown, that's not a good thing to be. The class clown is a delinquent, is somebody that doesn't get good grades. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm just trying to say that I was funny, that I made some people laugh, and I'm happy about that. Like, what kind of wild, crazy interpretation are you taking from this? He cried about it. Oh my goodness. So when I finally got my Asperger's diagnosis, which now has been relabeled to autism level 1. So apparently I do have an autism diagnosis. I told him about it over the phone. I was 25 years old, and I called him, and I said, I finally got that autism diagnosis. I finally got diagnosed with autism. And it was just dead silence on the other end. And I really wanted to say, like, this makes a lot of sense, and I feel like it finally explains a lot about my symptoms and what's going on with me. But it was just, this crushing silence on the other end of the line. And I couldn't bring myself to say anything more about it because I felt like he didn't want to hear it. And so we just moved on from that conversation, and we never talked about it again. So there is just a distinct lack of curiosity about me as an individual. Right? I get the feeling, I get the sense that my parents were trying essentially to turn me into a laborer, right? Somebody that can achieve the American dream is somebody that works hard for your company and for your country, right? Because that's what got them through life. And not to say that they were like exploiting me for child labor, but they were trying to turn me into an exploitable laborer through their parenting practices. And this is, from what I understand, pretty common for boomer parents to do. They had high demands of me that induced anxiety. They tossed medications at me. My dad advised me multiple times to join the military, and I've never been interested in that. They told me that I always take and never give, right? This is what my dad said. He said, you always take, and you never give back. And I was thinking as a child, what do I have to give? You just want me to do like chores around the house and stuff. Like, okay, then ask me nicely, and I would be much more happy to do it. But instead, you're demanding it. And it's giving me anxiety. It's making me feel freaked out. And you misinterpret that as like disrespect. As a child, what do I have to give you? You're the one that's supposed to be giving things to me. Negative emotions simply just were not allowed in that household. Negative emotions were severely punished. Even if I, let's say, took a deep breath to try to regulate my emotions a little bit, right, so that I wouldn't express negative emotions to them, they would see that deep breath as me sighing at them. My mom would say this all the time: quit sighing at me. You're rolling your eyes at me. And I wasn't really. I was either just making some innocuous movement with my face, or oftentimes when I had long hair, I would whip my bangs out of my face. And I guess she interpreted this as rolling my eyes. And me taking a deep breath, that thing that therapists and people advise you do to help you calm down and relieve your emotions, that would be interpreted as direct, targeted disrespect. This is how my parents saw me. They saw me as just a disrespectful little brat. And, in many ways, maybe I did act like that. I mean, we got into like screaming matches and stuff like that. But the thing is, my anxiety often manifests as frustration and anger. So I was expressing anxiety, and it came out as, bratty behavior, basically. And since negative emotions weren't allowed, emotional support just was not a thing. See, my parents really believed that they were good parents because they had money, because they gave me material things. They were like, actually my parents told me multiple times that the reason I was such a bad child is because they spoiled me. That's the only mistake they admitted to, was that they spoiled me too much, that they gave me too many things and they gave me too much leeway. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I have like things, I have like material possessions, sure, but to be honest, I think that maybe my dad in particular was buying a lot of things for me because he felt bad for the way he was treating me. And he maybe understood on some deep level that, he needed to ask forgiveness, and buying me little things like, instruments that I would never learn to play, and video games and stuff like that. Maybe that would be like adequate for him to just be a good parent, despite all of the screaming matches and all of the, closed-mindedness and all of this stuff. And they really thought that they needed to be harder on me, and that buying me things was like a mistake. But like, here's the thing, they did buy me material possessions, but my parents, like my dad, really didn't spend his money wisely. When I think back to it, he would have preferred to spend his money on his wife, on my mom, instead of on me. And I'm lucky to have gotten all the things that I did because he had enough money to, lease. We moved around a lot because of his job. Every time a project was done, we'd have to move somewhere else to a new project. And so he never bought a house. We always leased. We could have like rented an apartment or something like that, right? Or a condo, but instead he would always want to lease these really nice big houses. They were probably extremely expensive. My mom had all kinds of expensive jewelry, like payment plan expensive jewelry, huge collection of trinkets and knickknacks and stuff that are also expensive. A Mustang, which she had for like 10-15 years. He bought me like little things, right? Little possessions and stuff. But when it came to like medical care, that was neglected. When it came to mental health care, that was neglected. I did spend a while thinking about like, because he later on, when I was an adult, told me that he was making a lot of money. He was making like 6 figures. And I thought, okay, so you were making 6 figures. Why did you always tell me that you couldn't afford things that I was asking for, that I needed? Like I'll ask for like a video game and I'll get it. Sure, like whatever, that's $60, or back in the day it would have been closer to like 40, I guess. I had material possessions, sure, but like I sprained my knee one time and I went to my parents and I asked, can we go to the doctor? And they were like, oh, just walk it off. Just walk it off. Like, why? I still, to this day, have joint issues and pain because I didn't get treatment for that sprained knee. They also just kicked me out way too early. They really just wanted me to be normal, and, they had moved out. I guess my dad especially had moved out and become independent as soon as they entered adulthood. And so they wanted me to do the same thing. Even though I was very clearly not ready. I was so not ready. But, I mean, by the time I was about to turn 18, we were all so fed up with each other that I just decided to leave, basically. I felt that if they don't kick me out when I turn 18, I don't want to stay anyway. So I just left when I was 17, about to turn 18. And I've been pretty much on my own since then. My dad still gave me a lot of money, but I wasn't allowed to move back into the house, except for one time very briefly, which I'll talk about. But I wasn't allowed to move back in because my mom, who I had stopped communicating with as soon as I moved out, basically said that she didn't want me around because I tried to give her a heart attack. I tried to intentionally kill her via a heart attack from all of the stress that I induced. And my dad literally told me to my face one time that he would always choose his wife over me. If it came down to choosing between me and her, he would always choose her. And so my mom demanded an apology for my behavior before I was allowed to move back in. And I wasn't going to do that. I'm not going to apologize for being a traumatized autistic child, right? Like, I don't need to apologize. I'm not the one that failed there. So, I did move back in briefly. I think I was 18 or 19. I moved back in for a week because I had nowhere else to go. And I was working with, this was back when Overwatch, the original first Overwatch game, was like becoming really popular, and there was like an esports scene. And I joined a team. We were training, we were really good, and we were talking about entering some tournaments in the following month. And we would have legitimately had a good chance of winning some money. Like, I could have ended up, with like $2,000 from that. And so I was doing this in my parents' like dining room on a little fold-out table, a little folding chair with their Ethernet cable, and just the shittiest setup ever. But I was still doing well enough with this team that we really felt like we were going to earn some money. And as I was training with them, my dad turned off the Wi-Fi. He unplugged it, and he came to me and he said, "You're not going to be able to play that game anymore until you get a job. You need to get a job and start earning some money ASAP. If you don't have a job next month," and he was like, "You don't have to pay rent, you just need to have a job." And I tried to explain to him, I can have some money next month. I could even give you some if you really are concerned about that. But you need to let me do this thing. I tried to explain to him that I can actually earn money through gaming. And it's not just like the esports thing, right? There's a lot of other ways to earn money through gaming, streaming, and YouTube and stuff. And if you just give me some time to explore this avenue, then I could actually make some money off of this and maybe make a career. And he just refused to understand, unplugged the Wi-Fi, and from my team's perspective, I essentially ghosted them. And I wasn't able to get back in contact with them. So after that, I basically just left again. I was like, I don't want to live in this house anymore. Like, these people just don't respect me. They just simply don't respect me. And, they weren't curious about me. They tried to kick me out too early. They didn't allow me to have negative emotions, which caused me to mask even around my parents, to the point where it took me so long to realize that what I was doing was masking. Okay. I think I've gone over all of the points I've written down here. Yeah. At this point, I don't think it would be productive to talk to them about this. They are reaching the end of their lives. It's not going to be much longer for them. And I don't really see the point. I think it would just upset them to come out, and say, "Hey, just so you know, you really messed up." They raised 3 children, and 2 of them ended up homeless. Me and my father, my biological father. And when I think about it, with this autism thing, I think probably my biological dad has autism, and potentially my mom too. My mom potentially has autism, but I don't know. And I don't really feel like talking to her about it. I just don't think it would be productive. And I've had multiple therapists urge me to form some kind of relationship with my parents, but I just don't think it's productive at this point. I think that they really believe they did their best, but they just messed it up so badly. And twice. I don't really know what else to say, right? Like, I want to have parents that I love, but I didn't really feel loved by my parents. I feel some sort of attachment from them, especially my dad, who still, wants me to call him and everything, but then he doesn't want to hear when I have bad news, right? So when I don't call him very often, he's like, "Why don't you call more?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have anything good to say." And you get angry when I tell you bad news. So, I could call him and literally be like, hey, my car's broken down again, but I'm handling it. And he would just get like stressed out. So, I don't want to do that to him, and I don't want to deal with the way he acts when he's stressed out. So I don't call him very much. I just wish I had parents. Technically, I had 4 parents, and all of them failed me. All of them failed to understand me and to raise me in a loving and respectful way, and in a productive way. All of them failed to understand what was going on with me. And then finally, when I was 25 years old, I looked at some memes on Reddit, watched some videos on YouTube, took some self-assessments, and did a whole bunch of research throughout that year and the following years, got an autism diagnosis, and now I understand. And it's, so relieving to know, because now I know what to do. Now I know that I have to accommodate myself, that I can't just push through things the way that my parents really wanted me to do. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say, right? It's just kind of tragic. Everybody wants parents, right? Everybody wants somebody that loves them unconditionally. Everybody wants somebody that they can rely on. But these people are not people that I can rely on for that. And I don't really know what place they have in my life other than, the people that fed me and clothed me and put a roof over my head until they didn't want to anymore. And they demanded respect and work and labor in return without really, it felt very much like they loved me, but it wasn't like unconditional love the way it's supposed to be. Unconditional love would have been, understanding that I'm not the person that they want me to be, and that I'm never going to be that person, and to love the person that I am anyway. That would have been unconditional love. That's really not how they treated me. I really just got the sense that they wanted me to be different, that they didn't want me to be how I was. And I really, really tried to be how they wanted me to be, but it's just not possible. And I need to love myself unconditionally, because somebody has to do it. Somebody's got to love me unconditionally. And it's a struggle because of the internalized ideas that I've had about myself, because of the way that I've been treated throughout my life. The way I've been told is the only way to act. It's a struggle, but somebody's got to do it. And I'm here all the time. I know that I'm a kind and loving person, and I have the ability to love unconditionally. I have the open mind and the curiosity to understand. In fact, my entire life has been a quest to understand what is going on with me, how to live life and be happy, how to live a life that is worth living. I don't think, I don't know if my parents wanted me to live a life that was worth living, or that I felt was worth living, right? They never really asked me, like, what would make you happy in life? They asked me, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say things like, oh, I want to be an astronaut. That's not going to happen. Right? And they, I would say, maybe I could be a gamer. I could be a streamer. I could be a professional gamer. And I really could. I really, really could. They didn't believe that, though. They didn't understand it enough to know. They thought that I was just, trying to mess around on the internet and not, actually make a career. They thought that was a bad financial decision. Whereas now I know that it is actually possible, and I don't know, they just always, like, anytime I had a dream, I would get discouraged from it. They would discourage me from it for whatever reason, because they just really wanted me to have a very specific life. A very specific life that was similar to the one that they had. That is no longer possible in today's economy. And I knew it. I knew that even if it was possible, that's not really the life that I necessarily want to live. I wouldn't necessarily be fulfilled living that kind of life. Even at a young age, I understood that I had a higher level of intelligence than my peers on certain aspects. And I never, like, as long as I can remember, I never really respected adults as, like, knowledgeable elders, right? Like, I sort of understood, like, these people are older than me, right? They're adults. But I never acted like they knew things that I couldn't know or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I would have conversations with adults, and I would, be really pondering something, and they wouldn't really treat it as seriously as I was. Like, oh, look at this child trying to talk about free will, trying to talk about, how the economy works. This is a child, right? Like, I was trying to figure out things. I was trying to understand things and have real conversations, and none of the adults really, like, humored me. And so I sort of felt like, well, these people aren't as mature as I am. And, in some ways, in most ways, that wasn't true. Obviously, I was a child. They were more mature than me, especially, like, emotionally speaking. But when it comes to, like, these intellectual subjects and, like, these deeper thoughts, no adult was really willing to engage me with that. And so I got the sense that, like, I can't really talk to people about that stuff. I found people on the internet to talk to instead. But my parents, I don't think really, they called me, like, a gifted kid, right? They were like, you're an old soul, you're so wise for your age, you're so smart. Why are you having these problems if you're so smart? And I think the reason I was having the problems is because I was too smart to subscribe to the same ideas and to just sort of fall in line the way they wanted me to. I could sort of see through the bullshit, and they didn't like that, because that kid should not be smart enough to see through the bullshit. They didn't open their minds to that. I'm sure that they had internalized ideas about autism that were scary. Right, back in the day, really, people didn't understand about autism. They didn't understand that it's, not that terrifying. Maybe they had ideas about what autism looks like, that they thought, this kid can't be autistic, he's too smart, or something like that, right? They didn't open their minds to it. They didn't understand, and they didn't want to understand. I think, thinking back, both of my parents were very much controlled by fear. They were afraid of having a broken child and of failing to raise that child right. Which is why I continually got the sense that they just wanted me to be normal. They just wanted me to be normal. Anyway. I don't know what more to say. I just, I wish I had parents. That's it, right? I feel like I didn't really, have parents, to be honest. I feel like I sort of raised myself. All they really did for me was give me food and shelter and the basic necessities. And the rest of it was just a roadblock to my emotional development. And I don't really know how to move on from that. I guess, I sort of feel like I am my own parent, right? Like I'm both the overwhelmed child and the overworked parent at the same time. and so I have to parent myself. And it's been fairly successful, I think, so far. I've gotten pretty far. I've done some really interesting and good things for myself. And it hasn't been easy, but I'm still here and I'm still kicking. And I think things are about to get better if I can keep it up. But I really shouldn't have to do this on my own. So if you relate, let us know. You're not alone. A lot of people have parents that aren't curious about them and that really messed up. A lot of us have parents that didn't love us unconditionally and that were driven by fear into abusing us in some way or neglecting us. And if you got anything out of this video, be sure to give it a like, sub to the channel for more topics like this, and to follow me through my journey as I escape homelessness. I do live in my car. I live in a little car right now, and I'm fundraising for a van to improve my situation because, I don't want to be homeless anymore. I want to have a place where I feel safe. Leave a comment if you can relate, if you have any stories about your parents and the ways that they may have messed you up as well, because there's so many of us. We're all in this together. And there will be some links in the description to support me. I'll have my Patreon down there, I'll have my van fundraiser down there, and I'll have my Ko-fi and Cash App if you'd like to make a one-time donation. And thank you so much for watching, and have a peaceful day.